Now is Monica Medina. She is the founder and publisher of the Our Daily Planet newsletter. She's a former deputy administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under President Barack Obama. And she's something else that we're not going to talk about this morning, but she happens to be the wife of the man who is going to be the chief of staff to the next president of the United States, Ron Klain. But we're not talking about that, Monica. What we're talking about is that I don't know how long ago it was. Maybe it was a year ago. You organized a forum at Georgetown University, the first of its kind ever, in which you brought together the presidential candidates to discuss climate, 1 hour at a time, back to back to back. Now you've got a president who actually is going to make climate change a priority. What do you want to happen, and what do you think is going to happen?
Ali, thanks so much for having me on this morning. It's great to continue this conversation with you because, as you know from our climate forum a year ago, you sat hour after hour and talked to every candidate about the climate crisis. And that was critical to bringing that issue into the discussion in the campaign, both on the Democratic side, where the candidates had a range of views, and then into the general election campaign. Now, when it comes to what they can do going forward, as a person who worked in the Justice Department and in a large agency, there's a lot they can do almost immediately. I think one of the biggest things is begin to bring back enforcement. The Trump administration has rolled back regulations. They can put those back in place, but they can also bring enforcement back to bear and start to hold polluters accountable. And that's particularly important at a time of COVID, where air pollution exacerbates the problems that we're seeing with the COVID pandemic, on things like children's health, where it really, really matters. And even in research, in places like researching the connection between cancer and pollution. So there's a lot they can do right away with the powers of the federal government in their hands.
Talk to me about the idea of who runs this in Biden administration. Is it the Department of Energy? Is it a climate czar? It's a question we had with a lot of the presidential candidates. How do you get an all-of-government approach to climate? It looks like they're taking an all-of-government approach to COVID, right? They've got a commission that deals with how COVID will be handled by all different governments, not a small committee of people. What's the climate version of that?
Well, I think it starts with leadership at the top, and obviously the President-elect cares immensely about this, as does Vice President-elect as well. So this is important. That's an important signal that sends to the entire government from top to bottom. I think it matters that the appointments that they make are people who care and understand the climate issues, and they've committed to that. So, you know, as a journalist like you, I see a lot of very positive signs about the way that they're going to handle this, infusing it throughout the government from top to bottom and all the way across, and then reaching down into state and local governments and involving communities. And, you know, the way they dealt with the issue over the course of the campaign was really interesting. They brought in members of Congress as well as community organizers and youth activists to Secretary Kerry to try and tackle the issue. I think they'll take a similar type of approach because that's the way they've handled it so far.
Monica, sorry to interrupt you. I have a pretty energy efficient house, and I get all the water I need out of my shower head, and the toilet flushes just fine, and I've got normal sized windows. President Trump was really big about all that kind of stuff. He kept talking about tiny windows and shower heads and all that. But really, he was trying to scare people about what dealing with the climate looks like. It'll cost them money. They won't have airplanes. They won't be able to eat ice cream and all that kind of stuff. How do you present, or how does this administration present climate change and fixing it as opportunity as opposed to cost?
Well, as you know, from the campaign trail, the president-elect talked about the jobs that will be created by the dealing with the climate crisis. So I think that's one way. And I think the thing that really scares people isn't whether or not there's enough water coming out of their shower head, because there is. It's that they see that this is the year where we've had 30 named storms. That's unprecedented, where our West Coast was literally on fire and where Phoenix was 100 degrees for months on end. So that's what really frightens people. And I think what will help them feel better is knowing that there's an administration that's working on it and that there are positive ways that we can address the climate change that will help our economy, that will help us deal with the COVID crisis, that will keep our kids safe. I think, you know, when you think about the voting blocks that mattered in this election, it was suburban moms, and they care about their kids and the future for their children. So I think that's what's going to, I think, keep the administration focused on the issues. It's looking to who was their support and who turned this election in their favor. And they seem to have a really good sense of that.
Monica, thanks for the work that you've done on this front and for always being there for our audience. Monica Medina is the founder and the publisher of Our Daily Planet and a former official at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under President Obama. Well, the Trump